Hey there, and welcome back to On Thriving Astrology and More. I am your host, Taylor Schuler. In this episode, I talk with a colleague, friend, fellow astrologer, Andrea Michelle. Andrea Michelle offers astrology workshops, courses, private sessions, and mentorship in service to revitalizing the sacredness of being human and supports her clients to live courageously from their empowered, soul-steeped self. Her new podcast, Precious Human Birth, is set to debut in the spring of 2023. So I'm very excited to have her here on this podcast, on this show, and we talk about cycles. So we met because we both partner with the Astrology Hub on their Astrologer Connect platform. And I'd seen her around. I'd seen her on the Astrology Hub podcast as well. And she's brilliant. She's just brilliant. I also ran into her because, and I think we might talk about this in the episode. It's been a while since we recorded. Hint, behind the scenes, 12th house, behind the curtain. But we actually met by email a while ago when I was interested in learning more about the Mars phase, which is something that I work with my clients through Astrologer Adam Gainsbourg, one of my teachers, and she was partnering with Adam to support soul sign astrology, which is his astrology business. So I feel so grateful to have connected with Andrea. We have some things in common, especially progressed moons and Venuses. And in this episode, we don't just talk about cycles. So we talk about the Synodic cycle. So the cycle between the sun and another planet, or two planets together, and how the moon becomes full and new, and you see a half a moon in the sky, all that stuff. What does that mean? It means something in astrology, and we talk about that. And we talk about the nodes and Mars and Venus and eclipses and the fact that we're at a turning point. And we also talk about gender. And gender is a really important conversation. And I want to just say that here from the beginning, because if you don't want to hear us talk about gender, this might not be the episode for you. But essentially, we talk about it because it's really important that we all learn right now how to have respectful dialogues, how to have constructive dialogues, how to lean into compassion and do what Brene Brown says, which is give the most generous interpretation to someone when they're speaking and you're listening. Because we're all here to support and help one another on the earth. I mean, yeah, okay, that's a bit of an extreme statement, but I think that is the ultimate invitation, is to come from a heart-centered place so that we can understand each other, connect with one another, and live our greatest and highest good. And so we have this conversation, and at times some of you may disagree with what I say or what she says. That's okay. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have different opinions. But with the nodes in signs that are ruled by Venus and Mars, masculine, feminine, receptive, active, outgoing, gender is just something that comes up. It's part of our daily life. It's a construct. It's different than sex and sexuality. It's different from, there's the biological, there's a social construct. And these are really big topics, and they're topics that can bring up emotion for people. So I just wanted to say that before you listen to the episode. This might be the one for you, might not, but there's a lot of good information, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope to have her on again. And so I would love to hear what the questions are, what the invitations that you've had, that you've been considering after you listen to this episode. And I really encourage you to check out Andrea's website at Precious Human Birth, I believe it's .com, and connect with her work. It's really brilliant. She really helps a lot of people. She's so connected to the sky. On a very physical level by looking at the sky and interpreting what's actually going on up there. And she's a brilliant astrologer who I'm very grateful to count as a colleague and as a friend. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let us know what you think and leave us some comments. Join the conversation. All right, enjoy. Hello and welcome back to another episode of On Thriving. I'm your host, Taylor Schuler, and I am here today with the wonderful Andrea Michelle. Welcome.
Thank you, Taylor. It's really good to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to talk with you today. So we connected because we're both astrologers on Astrology Hub's Astrologer Connect platform. And we also had some other sort of like passings and interactions. We were emailing about the Mars cycle and the Mars phase and things like that, because I'm really interested in that work that Adam Gainsbourg does through soul sign astrology. And so our paths crossed there, and then I was like, hey, we should talk, we should connect. And we had this really great conversation a few weeks ago, and we were like, we should absolutely record a podcast episode and talk about some cool stuff. But before we get to our topic today, which is going to be about phases and cycles and things like that, how about you tell folks a little bit about you and who you are, what you do, for those who may not know you yet.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. And first of all, I wanted to thank you again for reaching out so kindly like you did. And we're like, hey, who are you on this Astrologer Connect platform with me? I want to get to know you. So it was really a treat to get to know you a little bit better and be on your podcast. So again, my name is Andrea Michelle Heckel, and my current website is precioushumanbirth.com. I named it because, well, for me, this birth, this human existence is something very precious, not to be wasted. It's a Buddhist saying, but I take that to heart myself. And I got interested in astrology sort of as a fluke, almost. I don't know how many years ago at this point, over a decade ago. And it just kind of came in drips and drabs. And then I was doing a lot of plant medicine. Actually, it was from doing plant medicine that astrology started coming in. And then I was in the jungle for 2 months on a very strict retreat. And I didn't even know at the time of Venus's passing in front of the sun in the last Gemini cycle in 2012.
Mm.
There I was in the jungle, very open energetically. And that conjunction, the inferior conjunction, took place on my progressed moon and progressed black moon Lilith in my second house. And it awakened something in me that is still unfolding to this day. But it wasn't long after that I came across Adam Gainsbourg and his work with the Venus cycle, and the pieces over the years started to fit together. But for me, it was the alignment of Venus with the sun, the Venus love, and the solar force of the heart, the heart's love and solar force of relating back to the source of ourselves here now in our little solar system as an earthling, with the sun, aka our hearts, as a central focus of our life's intelligence. That has literally become how I've started to orient to life, my clients, and how I practice astrology and try to live astrology and embody it. So that's how that came about.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story. And I love, just what you're saying about the sun and Venus, especially because when folks come to astrology, for the most part, I would say most people come to astrology through our sun signs. Mm-hmm. And that's what's most popular. It's easiest to figure out because unless you were born on the 19th to the 22nd of most months, you pretty much know what your sun sign is. And, if you're born during the day, which increasingly is the case because of cesarean sections and things like that, you might identify a bit more with your sun sign, or if you're born at sunrise, you might identify a bit with your sun sign as well. But a lot of people don't identify with it. But the sun is so important for a reason, right? It's big in our sky. It's very obvious. It literally allows us to shed light on things and to see things and to operate in the world. The sun gives the vital energy to the plants that then give us our vital energy, right? And so you talked a little bit about that Venus cycle. So what was going on there?
Mm-hmm. So that was the interior conjunction or inferior conjunction of the sun, which was a big deal, right? Because the time before that happened, if I'm not mistaken, was 2003. So anytime Venus is with her, has a conjunction with the sun, especially in her interior conjunction, that's where her geocentric north node is. So basically that means that she's going to be much closer to the sun and likely to pass in front of the sun than at any other cycle, any of her other star points, just based on, again, a lot of astronomical things in terms of like her relative orbit and speed and in relationship to the Earth, right? This is all in relationship to the Earth. So it was extremely potent for everybody, because normally the Venus Sun conjunction, or the any Sun conjunction with a planet, from the chart perspective, right, by longitude, it looks like a conjunction. They're in the same location, but it's very deceptive when we actually look at the sky, because by latitude, it's not always a conjunction. So a planet, this could be the sun on the ecliptic, and the planet could be in north latitude or south latitude. So not directly in conjunction with the sun. So when Venus began the Gemini cycle in 2012, it was that unusual sort of confluence of things that she was literally passing in front of the face of the sun. So we had the infusion of the solar energy with Venus, our love, our heart, our values, our magnetism, our femininity, both men and women, just the feminine in life, and our capacity to form relationship. So for me, it was super potent because, again, just use me as an example, that conjunction took place on my progressed moon and Black Moon Lilith. And Black Moon Lilith is an aspect of our shadow, especially our feminine shadow. So it really awakened the intelligence, Gemini, of my body's wisdom, second house, and Venus, to discover love in places that I haven't wanted to go before, shadow. And it was dark nights of the ego for quite some time. And I credit Adam Gainsbourg for calling it dark night of the ego rather than the dark night of the soul, because the soul is whole already. It's the ego that's got the problem. The ego that's like, I don't want to die. I don't want to go through any metamorphosis. So it really has continued to uncover a lot of waves now of places where I still don't want to know myself as love, holding my experience. So, and this is the capital L love, right? This isn't just romantic love. This isn't love like, oh, I feel good or I want a new puppy. This is like the love that doesn't care about right or wrong. It just wants truth, it wants honesty, it wants more real, more of who we are.
Yes.
And so the sun, like you say, it's so paradoxical, because in astrology, the sun, which is the most objective thing in the chart, rules the most subjective sign, Leo. So it's such a paradox, isn't it? That to get to the center of ourselves, we have to know ourselves, or to know ourselves objectively, we have to get to the center of ourselves in communion with life.
Wow. That was so much profundity in what you just said. I'm like, oh, where do I start there? I mean, first of all, a lot of the stories that we tell here on Thriving are people who've had that dark night of the ego. And I like that as well, the dark night of the ego, because that really is what goes kicking and screaming. And it is, I don't know, in my short so far life has been the hardest thing. And I'm not sure my ego is totally gone, and I don't think it ever is. And, there's arguments that there's a healthy place for the ego, right? Like we need to have an ego, but yeah, that ego death is the big one, right? That's like when you get the knock on the door and then it's like blow the door down sort of a thing. And you're sort of like never the same after that. Right. And it's at the same time, your life comes crashing down for some people, not for all people, but for me, it felt like my life came crashing down when I had that sort of experience. It's also the best thing that can ever happen to you, because you get a second chance at life. Right. I mean, that's how I feel. I feel like I got a second chance at like really doing it right and doing it big and doing it full of love. And so you're talking about love with a capital L, and I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. So I approach it through that sort of way of, forgiveness. And I think we got to this place in our conversation where I was saying, and there's only one of us here. And you were like, is there only one of us here? Or are we the universe experiencing itself in many different forms, but we are ourselves as individuals, and our individuality, which is connected to the sun, right, is so important for the universe to learn. It was sort of like this another paradox of that too.
Yeah, exactly. I love that, Taylor. We are both, and that's the for me, the invitation to in being human is, can we be both the particle and the wave, not one or the other? And generally we're choosing one or the other because we live in a dualistic framework of what we call reality, right?
Yeah.
And so it's our both of us having an appreciation for the depth and power of synodic or heliacal cycles to really form a broader context of a planet's role for us. And the fact that we bonded over that. If I may ask you a question, how did you get excited about it, and how do you find that it works in your life and your experiences with clients and for yourself?
Oh, good question. And thank you for asking. It's nice to like get the script flipped it for a second. So I came back to astrology. So I was into astrology as a child. I remember like being in Costco and like opening up, I think it was like Gary Goldschneider's book of birthdays or something like that. I know I had one at home, like one at Costco, and just being like, oh, this like book of birthdays. And my mom was into the I Ching, and she was into like all of the things. And, in the 70s, she had a psychic say, like, you need to keep your feet on the ground because they're going to come and lock you up if they see you floating. Because she was sort of Aquarian and out there and like full of this sort of energy. And so now I understand, as someone with the Scorpio moon, like that was somehow transmitted to me, even though she like kind of, it was around when I was a kid, but she wasn't super into it. So I feel like it really was like a DNA transmission with my mom for me in many ways. And then, I'd go to school and kind of be into the astrology, didn't really understand the sun sign stuff. I couldn't pick up on the archetypes and the patterns. And the kids were like, you're gullible. And I went to Catholic school, and it was like, shame, astrology. And then, I went through my dark night of the ego, had my relationship of almost 15 years collapse. School wasn't working out, work wasn't working out, money wasn't working out, home wasn't working out. All the things were really bad and hard and difficult. And I was rebuilding my life from the ground up, in a brand new place. And had a coworker who was like, have you heard of this website, sln.me? And so got me back in through Gary Goldschneider again, because it was the secret language name. And so it was funny how like that book was, and his work has really been like the entry point for me to astrology to begin with, and then back to astrology in my 20s when I was about to begin my Saturn return and my progressed lunar return, and it was like right after my nodal opposition. So, that's ages like 25 to 30, really. I came back to astrology. And then right before the pandemic started, there were a set of eclipses in Capricorn and Cancer that were happening. I'm a Capricorn sun. And so those eclipses were happening and preparing us all for January 12th of 2020, when we had that great conjunction with Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn that was happening on my sun. And so in retrospect, I can look back and see, the eclipse cycle in Capricorn and Cancer, I think, was preparing us all for that great conjunction. And then that was happening directly on my sun, which we're talking about. And yeah, in like 2019, I was like, I am an astrologer and I'm going to do this. And I just, ever since then, have been eating, breathing, sleeping astrology all the time. So it hasn't been long for me that I've like really been like, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm an astrologer, but it was just like obsession.
Right on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you heard about Adam Gainsbourg and then his work with cycles and
yeah. So in 2019, I found the Astrology Hub, and I think it was because he was on the Astrology Hub talking about the Mars cycle that I was like, okay, here we go. And then I had my had a Mars return, which we have every 2 years. So Mars was back in the same spot in my chart that it was in the sky when I was born. And some astrologers, when you're first learning astrology, they teach you to be like afraid of Mars. And I really appreciated a lot of the interviews that he did and the classes that he taught with Astrology Hub. And so I reached out And I took the Mars phase course that he does, which basically teaches that our Mars phase, the synodic phase of Mars and the sun. So synodic means like a phase of one planet to the sun and the relationship. So we can think of that as like, for people who are listening, who are like, what are they talking about? It's like, the phases of a moon, you have a full moon, you have a half moon, and you have another half moon on the other side. And then there's like no moon in the sky for a couple of days. It's the same. So like that's a synodic cycle between the sun and the moon, and every planet has that. So Mars and the sun have that, and it's a 2-year cycle. And so I took Adam's class about the Mars cycle. And Adam basically says that the Mars cycle is about our dharma. And the way that I explain it, which might not be how everyone does, but like my interpretation of his work is like, it's the how and the how I be and the how I do. Sort of like the how I move through the world, and the how is the dharma, because it's not necessarily like all of the what, but it's sort of like the how becomes the what, if that makes sense. So for example, my Mars phase, he calls the exploration phase. And the exploration phase is like, it's kind of Gemini. It's a Gemini Sagittarius axis. And I also have Mars in Sagittarius. So it's like going and trying lots of different things. And for a while, I was shamed by that because I had so many different jobs, and there's other things in my chart that speak to that. But I was in lots of different industries and I couldn't make up my mind about what I wanted to do. And I remember a coworker of mine who I adored was like, when are you going to make up your mind and just settle on something? And it made me feel really bad. And so then when I learned that my phase was like really about this exploring and collecting a ton of experiences so that later in life I could maybe relate to more people and understand how different people live, and use a little bit of everything to be like a jack of all trade, a master of none, right? Jack of all trades, a master of none is better than a master of one. And that's sort of like the how I move through the world. And so I love talking about the Mars phase with my clients, and really just reading charts. You can read a whole natal chart or any kind of chart just through phases and find so much information. And I remember Adam talking about that in one of the podcast episodes he recorded with Amanda on the Astrology Hub, where he was just like, oh yeah, like, this is what's going on in the weekly weather, but I'm not sure if it was a weekly weather. I want to say it probably was. But he was like, the Mars phase right now, or maybe it was one of the classes he was teaching. He's like, the Mars phase right now for like this period of time is inviting us all to dharmically operate in this way.
Right.
And this thing, and I was like, makes so much sense.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I mean, this is your podcast. It's great. And it's fun for me to hear you're talking about that, because, I'm passionate about it too, because it is so much, it provides so much more context, and it speaks to more of our soul level purpose for the planet function. It's like, as I learned, it's like, whereas our unique planet is the planet by sign house and aspect in our chart is our unique wiring for that aspect of our body mind. But the phase of the planet and its relationship with the sun, which indicates its phase, is how we are wired to be of service to the collective.
Yes, exactly.
And so it situates us. It's not an either or, where I have to either satisfy my desires or I have to do what's good for everybody, for the collective. It's like, no, I get to find satisfaction doing me, how I'm wired. But when I attune to that deeper frequency, spaciousness of the phase within the cycle I was born in for that particular planet, I am automatically linked in with what is best for the all, the good of all.
Right.
Consciously. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, like, when you learned about some of the synodic cycles and the phases, if it did for you what it did for me, or if it did something different for you. Because for me, and for most of the clients that I work with, when I share with them about the phase, what I find is, I can share about the Venus phase and they get like a sigh of relief, but I share about the Mars phase and tears come, because the shame is released. The shame that like patriarchy and capitalism have on us to operate in a certain way. Because I do think Mars is about how we operate also, right? Because it's how we take action in the world. And you make a really good point, obviously, about like sign house aspect. But I feel like people have the hardest time seeing that subtlety because we're not so good at patterns to begin with. Sign house aspect is difficult enough. And then to be like, what's interrelationship of like the phase and like, how do we then interpret that? And it's such a more nuanced level. I mean, that the work that Adam and all people who do synodic cycle work that they do, it's like, it is so next level because it's already hard to look up at the sky and be like, oh, that's there. What is that? That's over there. Like, what's the degree there? Like, what zodiac sign is? And then like, how do I assign meaning to that? But then like to take it to the phase level. So next level. So I'm curious, what do you find it brings up when you enter a chart in that way?
With people, with clients and stuff. That's an awesome question. And you know what the big irony, right, Taylor, is it's like it's next level, and yet this is exactly what our ancient forebears were doing. I mean, they weren't mapping it out necessarily in a nice book with a nice title, but they were watching the relationship of planets with the sun to help map the larger cycles, right? And so it's like it's literally an inheritance of our astronomical elders, our astrological elders who had, there was an implicit marriage of astronomy and astrology. It wasn't separate, you know? And so it situates us back, whether we are conscious or not, in a larger perspective. And what you're asking, and again, I'll just bring up from my own experience, because this is a really important point. I had no idea what was happening in the sky with Venus and the sun when that happened, but it informed me. It locked into my body and opened up what I call my soul circuitry. And it's like I've been uncovering that ever since. So here's the irony. We don't have to know our Dharma to be doing our Dharma. This is where we get caught up. We are so mentally having to track and piece together and have reasons for. And sometimes, as fun as that is, that can actually get in the way and then be an encumbrance to being open and not knowing and receiving information organically and letting our body's wisdom intelligence help to be part of the picture of how it gets interpreted, how it shapes our values going forward, how it shapes how we orient, how we take action, the choices that we make from a deeper interrelationship with all the components of our body, not just our brilliant minds, right? So I've been discovering about my feminine since that happened through experience, through what works, what doesn't work, and my own unique wiring. Same with clients. That's how I orient to it with clients, is if they can't understand it from like a, oh yeah, I get what you're saying perspective, I encourage them to just kind of let it wash over them. And they have the recording, I generally record, and then just like see how it unravels them. And sometimes they'll get, I know you're saying something in between the words, Andrea, and I can't track it, but I can feel it in my body. And then I know that's the most important thing. Whether they get it or understand it is less important than they're open to receiving it in their body, because that's where it comes in and it can actually start to work its magic in with them in their own body's wisdom and timing.
That makes so much sense, because what I come back to time and again with all astrologers are two things. One is about validation, and the other recently is about the feminine and the masculine. So quickly, I just want to say one of the most powerful things I think astrology does, which it's almost like the form matching the content, is that, which I'm a big fan of, what astrology can do is, the practice of astrology itself is a reclamation of natural wisdom, nature-based wisdom that was taken, stolen, alienated from us in order to keep us oppressed and keep power from the many and keep it consolidated amongst the few for, I think, probably not good reasons. right? So the form matching the content would be that when we reclaim that knowledge, what we're also doing is revalidating in ourselves what we already know to be true, because that also was taken from us, stolen from us, really beaten out of us, because our own self-assuredness, our own self-confidence is a threat to power. So I think we're taught in the system today to second guess ourselves, to feel shame, to feel guilt, to feel negative feelings very easily, and to not trust our gut instinct. So what you're saying about what's most important is that people feel it and acknowledge it. And as astrologers, again, for matching content, what we're doing is teaching people to listen to that, to validate them in what they already know to be very true, and just say, yeah, stop second guessing yourself. This is absolutely natural. Be who you are, stand in your power, stand in your truth, live your life, do what you got to do, let go of the shame, let go of the guilt, let go of the fear, and keep it moving, because YOLO, and it's beautiful and it's all love, right? And then about the feminine and the masculine, it was so beautiful because you're talking about receiving, and like receiving is this feminine and masculine. Here we are talking about like the two cycles we were talking about are like the Venus Synodic cycle and the Mars Synodic cycle. And it's so interesting that I keep coming back to this conversation with almost everyone I talk to, astrologer or not, right now. I mean, like literally everyone is just like feminine, masculine, like men and women, and what is going on today? And then and there's the trans movement too. And so and it's all, to me, I think tied into a couple things. I mean, we just came off of a Mars retrograde cycle that was pretty long, which was in Gemini, which gets us talking and talks about like nonviolent communication, which I think is sort of like a masculine feminine thing if you're talking about nonviolent communication. We're coming into a new Venus Synodic cycle where Venus is moving from meeting up with the sun in Scorpio to meeting up with the sun in Libra for the first time in 180 years or something like that.
You mean for the next cycle?
For the next cycle, yeah.
Leo, right? The Leo cycle, the sun, moon, the next interior conjunction is.
Yeah, the next one, but the last one that we had in October 27th.
Oh, the last one. Yeah. Right.
So, 4 years ago, the sun and Venus met up around, I think, 2 degrees of Scorpio. This time, the sun and Venus met up at 29 degrees of Libra.
Oh, I got you. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And then in 4 years, 3.5 years at this point, the sun will meet up with Venus at like 1 or 0 degrees of Scorpio. But then for the next 100 years, the sun and Venus will meet up in Libra. So there's like that thing going on. But then also we have the nodes of where the eclipses happen, where the sun and the moon meet up, moving from the Mars and Venus, or Mars, Pluto, and Venus ruled signs of Taurus and Scorpio into this July of 2023. Those nodes will be moving into the other Mars and Venus ruled signs of Aries and Libra. And I find that when the nodes and the eclipses are in the cardinal axis, a lot of stuff about gender starts coming up, where it's like, are women too masculine? Are men not masculine enough? Are men too feminine? Are there gender things that we need to talk about right now? And then, can we even say masculine or feminine? Do we have to say yin and yang? Do we have to say receptive and active, or like aggressive, or like getting out there? How can we talk about these things? And I think what's coming up right now, and I'm really curious your take on it, I think what's coming up is a radical reclamation of what seems like unreasonably traditional, quote unquote, gender rules or norms or conversations, which are really just a reclamation of our natural states of being that are antithetical to mainstream economic and power principles like capitalism, because, God forbid, like people lean into their feminine side and just receive, in patriarchy and capitalism, like receiving is like, the archetype of the welfare queen comes out, if you want to take it to like an extreme example, and it's like, that's not okay. Right. I don't think people are necessarily suggesting that, but it's like, we kind of go to the extreme and then go into attack mode, and we can't just have a conversation about, okay, what do we really mean by feminine? What do we mean by masculine? What do we mean by receiving? What do we mean? And then does gender have to be aligned with like sexual identity, or can they be separate entities? So that was a lot.
Wow. Yes. Wow. Yeah. I've been really sitting with this myself, and well, I should say it's been arising for me too. And from what I've been seeing, which is to point to everything would take too much, would be a podcast in and of itself. But to speak to, for me, it's important to separate male and female from masculine and feminine, because masculine and feminine are the two implicit forces of the nature of the universe that are the co-creation process itself, that are non-genderal. They have nothing to do with plumbing or sexuality. I mean, they do have something to do with sexuality in terms of eros, the erotic life force itself, and the coming and separating, coming together in separation. So for me, they're separate from male or female or any kind of gender identity. But I have a really interesting story. It's a true story, and it happened just a client that I was sitting with, and hopefully this will kind of explain. So client came to me the other day, this woman, and we were talking about her chart, and she had South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus. Her Venus and Pluto were on the South Node in Scorpio. And she was telling me, we weren't talking about this in particular, but she mentioned that, when she was young, she was a tomboy. She wanted to be a boy, and she cut her hair short, and she just wanted to be with the boys and do boy things. And now when you look at her, she's like this beautiful woman, very, very feminine. And it was a very prescient example for me of the power of astrology to really get underneath the story. She had Venus in Scorpio with Pluto there on the South Node. Her feminine Venus had been suppressed, Scorpio. She wasn't, maybe in past lives, she was mostly born as a man or identified more as a male to get by in a culture. So naturally, coming into this life, she identified more with her masculine side. But her North Node in Taurus meant that she was meant to evolve into more of her femininity. So for me, it's a little bit of it's a touchy subject, but it bears saying that if she were born now and she was in a particular environment or particular school or had particular parents, and she started to say, I really want to hang out with the boys and cut my hair short, and they immediately said, oh, you must be a boy, and put her on gender affirming hair and whatever, that's curtailing her evolutionary growth to becoming the feminine woman that she was born to be. So it's so tricky. And I think that it's also what our time is showing us is how polarized we are. And as the nodal axis goes into South Node in Libra, particularly North Node in Aries, Libra is a sign of polarization, of like literally splitting and projection. So unfortunately, I think there is more of a fluidity, not unfortunately, but there is more of a fluidity in a dance between the masculine and the feminine, the lunar masculine, the solar feminine. But because we are projecting everything outwardly, the shame is we don't have elders and people to help initiate younger children into understanding this gender fluidity without necessarily having to change their bodies. Like it's an internal process. It's not how you present on the outside or what labels you give yourself that is a mark of who you are. It's how well adapted to your inner environment, your inner life, your soul, your spirit's evolution that has to be taken into consideration. And that's completely cut off from this whole gender identity dialogue, in my experience. Because there are people who are two spirits.
Yes.
It is a real thing. It's like, I'm not in any way, shape, or form denying that there's more fluidity happening. What I am cautious about is that it's only being externalized and becoming about labels and identity politics. And it's not addressing the child. And again, like this woman is an example. It's natural that she identified as a boy coming in, but she was born as a woman in a female body to come ultimately to journey through her life to discover her feminine her natural femininity. So again, I'm really cautious about curtailing these things for children at such a young age, because it's literally making it all about the outward appearance and not addressing the inner truth of the evolutionary spectrum.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, because I think there's so much that goes into all of this, right? I mean, there's the one thing that you could say, well, why would a soul be born with the technology, like at a time when the technology is available, right? Because, and I don't know, we'll have to see what happens with people and what the journey is. But your point also, or especially about the labels, has been something that I found to be so important. That using labels is a huge problem, because it prevents us from having the discussion. And I think the point of what I'm hearing you say is that conversation and understanding and sharing knowledge and understanding ourselves, going back to like what you were saying about Leo, like getting to the heart of yourself is really like, you know, understanding yourself. And it seems like Leo can sometimes be characterized as like egotistical and like out there and showy and like performing and wanting all this attention, but it's also the one that has the heart, that has the courage, that has the bravery. And it is where the sun, you know, has its home, its rulership. And so it will be really interesting to see how the science and the technology of gender and sex, you know, sexual identity and all of that in the body start to merge, and the two maybe come to a point where, you know, the client that you're talking about, like people are having that experience. Because I feel like I had that experience as a child too, where I was very like, you know, there were absolutely points in time where I was like, I'm a tomboy. And there were points when people would be like, you think you're a tomboy, but you're not a tomboy. And I was like, but I think I am. And there are times when they might have been like, oh no, she definitely is. Like I see it now. And I don't know what kind of choice I would have made. I really don't know. There might have been some times when I would have made a choice to like use that science, and I present how I present now. I wouldn't have gotten here, you know, had that been available. I mean, maybe I would have like done it and then been like, okay, I still want to wear makeup, you know, I don't know. But having conversations and explaining what we're talking about is so important. And I really do think that like the sexual identity, or like what your body does and how it operates, is such a distraction from the thing that is really important for us to talk about, which is like, how are we operating, and how healthy is our feminine, and how healthy is our masculine, and how do we express those things? Are they suppressed and oppressed, or are they allowed to flourish? And what does that look like in someone, regardless of their gender, performativity, role, and, you know, sexual identity, male or female, like separate from all of that, how are we all feeling healthy in that way? And it's a very complex conversation. It's very sensitive. It's very charged with politics. And I think the invitation is for all of us to just use our words more and come with the nonviolent communication that the recent Mars retrograde and Gemini cycle invited us to really lean into and learn more about, so that we can explore this deeper and then come into a world where if someone wants to choose that science, they've made an informed decision and we all can support them. Or if they don't want to use the science and want to perform their gender in a traditional or non-traditional way, they can go ahead and do that. And if you are, you know, a cisgendered person, you can also, like, we can talk about how masculinity and femininity really infiltrate all parts of our lives. Like I was saying, the economy and like, and work and all things. I mean, it really is all things and everywhere. So I think it's going to be interesting, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us with the nodal cycle and the eclipse cycle. Really everything that's going on for us to have these conversations. But yeah, you did mention that we're having a new Venus cycle in Leo, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. If you've
Thank you for that juicy. This has been so juicy from start to finish. Although we're not. There's a lot setting Venus up Black Moon Lilith has been going into Leo. I also want to mention, when you talked about that big conjunction in January 12th of 2020, Ceres was right there too.
Yes.
And she is a major, in my experience, the asteroid goddesses, the main ones, and Eris are coming online. And Ceres, that was a huge thing, a momentum for me. So Ceres transits and the way she's been initiated, she's getting her solar feminine initiation. Ceres, 3 out of the 4 major solar markers of this year, the Aries ingress, the Cancer ingress, Libra, and Capricorn, Ceres is there at 0 degrees, either in opposition to the sun or squaring the sun. So she is very much a part of this feminine resurgence, feminine again in both men and women.
Yes.
And so all in preparation, these deeper layers of, and Scorpio is Mars's feminine sign. So there's a lot that has to be uncovered around feminine forms of manipulation and shadow and jealousy and subterfuge. And, you know, for women or our feminine to really become empowered, we need to acknowledge how much we have used the feminine as the repository of shadow. And that's so much. Anyway, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but for me, this Leo cycle of Venus is another opportunity, a rung of the spiral, to own more of our feminine power, our feminine solar nature, which is how much of our own feminine light are we available to access, embody, shine into the world, be in the world. How much are we all individually available, whether we have Venus in Leo or not, whether we were born in a Venus-Leo cycle or not? How much more light of our own inner light are we able to radiate, receive all the feminine things, form relationship with, within ourselves first, and then among and with others?
Yeah. It's so beautiful, because so we're talking about you've alluded to, I think before you said Capricorn, and then you said Scorpio are feminine signs. And so the water signs and the earth signs we see as feminine, and the air signs and the fire signs we see as masculine. So even though Venus is associated in many ways with the feminine, Leo as a fire sign is a masculine sign. So you have this Venus feminine with the solar in this, the solar, you know, masculine in like the masculine sign coming together. And Ceres, the goddess. And so, and I do a goddess podcast with my friend astrologer, Chris Journey. So guys, check that out if you don't already. We talk about the astrology of the goddesses for every month, but Ceres is the goddess of the harvest and the cereal. So Ceres, Ceres. But she mourned her daughter Persephone being stolen by Pluto, Hades, taken to the underworld half the year. So that's why half the year we have crops, when she was very happy her daughter was there. And then half the year Ceres mourned and she grieved. And so Ceres is going to be at 0 degrees of Libra, right? An air sign, a masculine sign, but Libra is the sign of relationship. And so I think in many ways, what we're talking about is grieving our old ways of thinking about gender and thinking about relationship, and starting something new, because Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, those are cardinal signs. They're movable signs. They're the things that get things initiated. They begin things, and they begin the seasons for us. And so that's why you were saying, you know, that's why you called those signs out, because we have, you know, the beginning of spring, summer, fall, and winter with those 4 signs. And so Ceres there is like beginning something new. And I really love everything that you said about, you know, Venus talking about that solar feminine, because it really is taking the feminine and imbuing it through the masculine of taking action. And I think the thing that we need to mourn is our own fear of vulnerability, because to me, that's what femininity and the feminine really is the power and the dread and fear that we have of being belly up.
Very good.
And just being like heart wide open, because that Leo heart is just so courageous. It's so full of love. It's just wide open. If you wanted to bring it to Christianity, it would be like, like the heart of Christ, right? Which is just all loving and life-giving, and sacrificing life for life.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that, Taylor. And that speaks very much to Chiron and Aries vulnerability and the lunar. I mean, again, this is like dipping into a whole other topic, but when Mars had his opposition with the sun back in December, the moon was right there. And for me, again, this is the more of the lunar form of the masculine. And especially since we have Mars as the traditional ruler of Scorpio, his feminine night sign. So yeah, this is maybe we do a whole other topic on
that. Would be so great to talk about Mars, talk about Chiron, talk about like the Ceres Chiron opposition. I think Mars will come. Mars is actually, it's going to square. Well, I don't know if the square goes exact. It's already squared Ceres, and it's about to square Chiron in I think May or early June. Taurus
coming up.
May, April or May. So during Taurus season, it's going to be happening. So that'll be really interesting. So I'd love to have you back and we'll talk more about it. But I also just want to call out that I think that we have done a very good job of demonstrating and embracing vulnerability and exploring new ways to talk about these things. And I hope that anyone who's listening can honor the fact that we are trying, that we've done some of this, and we're human and we may not be perfect. And it's all about just having respect for one another and respect for trying new things with that masculine side, but also expressing vulnerability with the feminine side, so that we can try to come together like Saturn and Pisces and Pluto and Aquarius are inviting us to do, so we can try to make the world a better place and just live good, happy lives.
Yeah. Right.
So, Andrea, where can people find you? I know you said it earlier, but
yes, I'm just going to be launching a new website, probably after the eclipses, after eclipse season, but it's right now I'm at precioushumanbirth.com, but it's going to be, my new website is going to be my name, AndreaMichelleHeckel.com, and Heckel is kind of a mouthful. It's HAECKEL.com. So it's been really, and I think we've done a good job of staying kind of on topic with cycles. Dipped here and there, but we did pretty good with, bringing it back to cycles. The power of them. So
absolutely. And I think we have so much more that we could talk about. So I'm looking forward to having you back again. Thank you so much for joining, and everyone else, we'll see you again next time.